There's a kind of strength that makes people step back when you enter a room, not because you're aggressive, not because you're loud, but because something in you has been forged to the point where weakness simply doesn't exist anymore. You've probably seen this person, maybe at your gym, maybe at work, maybe in your own family. They don't flinch when life hits them. They don't negotiate with themselves about waking up early. They don't break promises to their own reflection. And here's what unsettles people most. They seem immune to the chaos that destroys everyone else. This isn't genetics, it's not luck, it's the result of a specific process that most people will never complete, because the first stage alone requires killing a version of yourself you've spent years protecting. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus was 34 when his wife left him. She didn't leave because he was abusive or unfaithful. She left because he was weak. Those were her exact words. You're a good man, but you're weak. You give up on everything. The gym membership he never used. The business idea he talked about for 3 years but never started. The way he'd promised to fix things around the house and then watch Netflix instead. Small failures that accumulated into a pattern she couldn't respect anymore. The day she moved out, Marcus stood in his empty apartment and felt something crack open inside him. Not sadness, not anger, something colder, a recognition that she was absolutely right. He'd spent his entire adult life being soft, comfortable, taking the path of least resistance in everything. And now he was alone in a half-furnished apartment with nothing to show for 34 years except a collection of abandoned goals and broken promises. Most people in this position make temporary changes. They join a gym for 2 months. They read a self-help book. They post motivational quotes on social media. Then they slide back into the same patterns because they never actually change the architecture underneath. Marcus did something different. He found a book written by a Japanese swordsman who lived 400 years ago, Miyamoto Musashi. The man fought over 60 duels to the death and never lost, not once. And before he died, he wrote down everything he'd learned about strength, discipline, and the specific process required to transform yourself from someone who breaks to someone who cannot be broken. The book described 3 distinct levels of development. Most people never leave level 1. Some reach level 2 and mistake it for mastery. Almost no one reaches level 3 because it requires something most modern people find unbearable: the complete elimination of comfort as a decision-making factor. Marcus started with Musashi's first principle: remove all dependencies. He looked around his life and identified every crutch he was leaning on: the coffee he needed to function, the phone he checked 40 times a day, the excuses he made when things got hard, the friends who enabled his weakness by never challenging him, the entertainment he used to numb himself instead of facing what needed to be faced. One by one, he began cutting. He started training his body, but not the way most people do. No fancy gym with mirrors and air conditioning. He found a park and did push-ups in the dirt. Rain, snow, heat, it didn't matter. The conditions were part of the training because Musashi understood something most people miss. If your discipline depends on perfect conditions, you don't have discipline, you have preference. 3 months in, Marcus's body started changing, but something deeper was shifting too. The voice in his head that used to negotiate every morning: just 5 more minutes, you can start tomorrow, you deserve a break. That voice was getting quieter, not because he was fighting it, because he was starving it. Every time he showed up when he didn't want to, he was proving that voice wrong. Every time he kept a promise to himself, he was building evidence that he wasn't the person his wife had described. And evidence accumulated over time rewrites identity. But this was still just the foundation, the first level of a much deeper transformation, because physical strength alone changes nothing. Plenty of people can do push-ups and still collapse emotionally when life applies pressure. Musashi knew this. He knew that real strength, the kind that makes people uncomfortable to be around because it reflects everything they're not, requires training the mind to a level most people will never attempt. And that training begins with understanding something counterintuitive about how fear actually works. Fear doesn't live where most people think it does. It's not in the moment of actual danger. It's in the anticipation, the what-ifs, the scenarios your mind creates about things that haven't happened and probably never will. Marcus discovered this during week 17 of his training when he decided to test something Musashi wrote about confronting discomfort deliberately. He started taking cold showers, not the kind where you ease in gradually, full cold from the first second. And what he noticed changed everything. The dread beforehand was worse than the actual cold. His mind would scream at him for 5 minutes before he even touched the water. But once he was in. 30 seconds later, his body adapted. The suffering his brain predicted never materialized at the level it promised. This revealed something crucial about how weakness perpetuates itself. Your brain lies to protect you from discomfort. It exaggerates consequences. It invents catastrophes. And if you listen to it, you never discover that most of the walls you think are solid are actually just shadows. Musashi called this training the mind to remain still, regardless of circumstance, not suppressing fear, not pretending it doesn't exist, simply refusing to let it make decisions for you. There's a massive difference. Suppression creates pressure that eventually explodes. Acknowledgement without obedience creates space between stimulus and response. That space is where power lives. Marcus began applying this everywhere. Difficult conversation he'd been avoiding. The dread beforehand was the only real obstacle. The actual conversation was fine. Project at work that felt overwhelming. His mind had inflated it into something impossible. When he just started, it was manageable. Pattern after pattern, he kept finding the same truth. His brain's threat assessment system was wildly miscalibrated from years of avoiding anything uncomfortable. Month 6 arrived. Marcus had lost 40 pounds. His body looked different. But more importantly, he moved through the world differently. People noticed. His boss commented on it. Old friends remarked that something had shifted but couldn't identify what. Even strangers seemed to register it. The cashier, who usually ignored everyone, suddenly made eye contact and smiled. This is what happens when you remove the invisible weight of unkept promises and untested fears. You don't have to announce your transformation. It announces itself through presence. But Musashi had warned about this phase. This is where most people stop. They reach visible results, external validation, and they think they've arrived. They haven't. They've just completed the second level. The body is disciplined. The mind is calmer. But the third level, the one that separates those who transform temporarily from those who transform permanently, requires something else entirely. It requires you to stop caring whether the transformation continues or not. That sounds backwards, contradictory even. But Musashi explained it clearly. As long as your strength depends on maintaining it, you're still operating from fear. Fear of losing what you've built. Fear of returning to who you were. Fear of judgment if you slip. True strength emerges only when you're no longer attached to being strong. When the practice continues, not because you're afraid of what happens if it stops, but because it's simply become what you are. Marcus tested this in month 9. He deliberately took 3 days off from training. No workout, no cold showers, no rigid discipline, just normal life, and something unexpected happened. On day 4, he woke up and trained, not because he had to, not because he was afraid of losing progress, but because his body wanted to move. The external structure he'd built had become internal nature. That's the shift nobody tells you about. You spend months building discipline through force and structure. Then one day you realize the structure is gone, but the behavior remains. You're no longer becoming someone disciplined. You simply are. The difference is everything. Someone becoming disciplined is fragile. One bad week and the whole thing collapses. Someone who is disciplined doesn't have that vulnerability because there's nothing to maintain. It's not an achievement. It's an identity. Marcus reached level 3 12 months after starting. His ex-wife heard through mutual friends that he'd changed. She reached out. They met for coffee. She barely recognized him, not just physically, but the way he carried himself, spoke, existed. At the end, she asked what happened. He thought about Musashi, about cold showers, about push-ups in the rain, about the 1,000 small decisions that had rewritten who he was at the foundational level. He could have explained all of it. Instead, he said something simpler. I stopped negotiating with myself, and everything else followed from that. Most people will watch this and do nothing. They'll feel inspired for about 6 hours. Maybe they'll even do a few push-ups tomorrow morning. Then the negotiation starts again. Just this once. I'll start Monday. I'm too tired today. That's fine. Transformation isn't for everyone. It requires something most people aren't willing to give. The death of the comfortable version of yourself that's been running the show for years. But if you're still here, if something in this story made your chest tighten because you recognized yourself in Marcus before he changed, then you already know what needs to happen. You know exactly which dependency you need to cut first. You know which fear you've been letting make decisions for you. You know which promise you keep breaking to yourself. The question isn't whether you understand what needs to be done. You do. The question is whether you'll actually do it when the alarm goes off tomorrow morning. and your brain starts listing reasons why you should wait another day. Musashi fought 60 duels and never lost because he understood something that took Marcus 34 years to learn. Strength isn't about what you can do when you feel motivated. It's about what you do when every part of you wants to quit and you show up anyway. Not because you're special, not because you have willpower others don't, but because you've decided that the person you're becoming matters more than the comfort you're leaving behind. The 3 levels are always there. Most people never leave one. Some taste 2 and think they're finished. Almost nobody reaches 3 because it requires letting go of the very thing they spent months building, the identity of someone trying to be strong. You don't try to be strong. You eliminate everything weak until strength is all that remains.